Not too far away, and not too near, lies a place that feels like a soft, warm blanket, the kind that still holds the memory of a hug from someone you love. A place where every thread is a story, quilted from memory, imagination, and spirit. This is Threadbare. There are villages of yarn, towers of thimbles, hills of blankets stacked so high they might pass for mountains. There are tiny people, no bigger than a pinprick, who live in pockets of paragraphs, forests of tall tales, and quilts stitched together entirely from stanzas. They sow songs like wheat, harvest memories spun by wordworms, trade stories, the way you might sort marbles in a pocket. But every story needs a keeper. You slept in the drawer of an ancient sewing machine, curled amongst the broken needles and frayed spools. You had nothing, not a stitch, not a scrap, not even a button to your name. But then the first stitch whispered apart in the dark, followed by another, and slowly the fabric began to unravel. From the edges crept the void, pulling at loose threads, unmaking patches, leaving only silence and holes. And that is when you woke, for you are the story weaver. Through story quests, you will gather threads and restore what has been lost, dreams recovered, sorrows faced, worlds rebuilt, one story at a time. Every quest a patch, every story a stitch placed back where it belongs. From the warm hearths of Frey's End to the edges of the void itself, Threadbare is more than a place to explore. It is a living world, open, unfinished and waiting. Built by players who become creators, every quest you see was made by someone like you. This is your invitation. Play the world and then help build it. Join us in building the game.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of the Loom Lounge. It's very special because we have two guests here today. My name is Sarah. I am the senior producer. Oh my gosh, we're already to a great start. Senior producer here, working on Threadbare. I'm also kind of our temporary host today while Heather and Stephen are out having adventures. Before we get started, I'd love for our guests to introduce themselves. I'm going to hand it off to Alonso first.
Hey everyone, I am Alonso. I am a game producer and indie game developer. I'm one of the co-founders of Smarter Club, which is a studio from Chile in South America, and we've developed games such as Teacup and the recently released Bourbon Galaxy.
Cool. I guess I'll go. I'm Jax. I am a game designer here on Threadbare, but I also am co-founder at Peripheral Playbox, which is a brand new studio that's remote with a bunch of friends. Our game, our only released game is Drywall Eating Simulator, which is a short comedy adventure game about eating drywall because the world is crazy.
Amazing. Super happy to have you both on here. So as many of you know, we're going to be talking about, launching a game, what happens after you launch a game. So many resources available to us in the games industry always talks about how to build a game, which is very important, right? You have to have a game to be able to launch a game. But really, once you launch, what happens? So we're going to dive into that today because both of our devs here have launched games and they have very different paths and experiences doing it. And so we're going to examine it. I have some questions prepared, but I really encourage folks in the audience to ask questions as well. I'm going to be checking in occasionally, and so we'll slip in some as we can. So the first question I have for both of y'all, and feel free to hop in just whenever, is how did you know when your game was finished, like ready for launch? At what point were you like, this is it, like we got to go?
Is it ever ready? Yeah. There's this classical phrase that kind of like art is never finished, it's only abandoned, which I like a lot. But yeah, the question becomes like, when do you abandon your art? Because yeah, you could always, there's always stuff you could add, there's always stuff you can improve, there's always stuff to ideas that you have and want to do. And I think there's like a lot of different ways to approach it. And I do think, in my case, like, so as I mentioned in my introduction, I worked on 2 games, Teacup and Balloon Galaxy, and they both were pretty different experiences. So I can talk to like both of them just to like give 2 different data points. For Teacup was our first project as a studio, so it was like a very small and short game, and like since it was our first like time making a commercial project, like we were starting out as an indie studio, we were like really conscious about like trying to make a game that's like really small and contained and like not overextend ourselves, because like yeah, it's our first time making a commercial project in Unity to be launched in across multiple platforms, so we should try to keep it nice and small so that we can actually polish it and release it and like make something people enjoy. So yeah, the final game was like short, 2 hours long, and like the way we approached that was kind of like, okay, yeah, we had already made a prototype for the game early on, and kind of like, and I guess I can talk later on about like the process of signing with the publisher. But when we signed with the publisher, we made a deal to release the game in 1 year. So we basically went back and said, okay, yeah, let's look at how much content or how much progress we made this time before working with the publisher, and then kind of like, okay, if we have 1 year, how much content or like how much levels can we build based. And we kind of like did a projection, added like some buffer time to say like, okay, yeah, let's make sure we have time to polish. And I do think there's a lot of stuff that kind of course, like you make this plan, you feel like it's going to go well, and some stuff go well, some stuff don't go well. So there's definitely stuff that fall by the wayside. But at least kind of like if you have a clear idea at the start of the game, like what's the core, what's the essence, what's the experience you want to deliver, I think like even if you reach the finish line, like the deadline for when you're going to release the game, even if there's some stuff missing, even if you manage to transmit the experience that you wanted, I think that's a good sign that you can like start to wrap things up and start working towards release, even if deep down there's stuff that you want to continue working on. Because yeah, there was stuff we wanted to continue working on. That was Teacup. Balloon Galaxy was a bit of a longer process. It was a bit of a looser process since we didn't have such a hard deadline for release date with our publisher for that game, and there was like a lot of more iteration. So for that game in particular, we wanted to make sure it wasn't just good. We wanted to make sure it was like great. So we had spent a lot of time there, really just kind of like, especially towards the end of the game, the end of development, we had like completed our plan. Like, okay, yeah, there's a beginning, middle, and end. Here's like the content we want to do in the game, but there's a lot of stuff we could improve and stuff like that. So there's a lot of like iteration towards the end of like, okay, let's try to improve this. Like, this isn't working. Okay, let's spend some time doing that. So for that game in particular, I think it was a bit more of a prolonged process. We were like less strict about trying to finish it on time and wanted to spend more time on quality. But I think at some point we reached like it's like basically 90% of what we wanted to do. There's this joke like the last 10% is their next 90%. I think like we reached the point like of diminishing returns where we could have like continued improving it, but these continued improvements would have made the game better, but it would have been like a lot more effort for much less gain. So kind of like when we hit the point where we felt like, yeah, we could keep on polishing, but the polish we were doing now wasn't improving the game as much. That's when we hit the point of, okay, yeah, let's start to wrap up and work towards actually releasing this game.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, I mean, it definitely is so difficult to try and predict this. I mean, you're a producer, so like really at the end, you're like, oh, how much do we actually accomplish and get in? And again, we'll talk about publishers in a moment, but yeah, that's that extra layer of like, oh, we have an extra accountability from someone else not on the team. So definitely want to dig into that in a moment. Jax, I'm really curious about you because I know, or at least if I remember from our conversations, you had like a very specific plan in mind for not developing forever and ever and ever, right?
Yeah, like I also forgot to mention I also directed Hello Crew World, which was a queer VR horror puzzle game at Occupara Games, which is Drywall was like what I made with my own studio. But both of those games, like essentially what I do is I try to make like a map of like, here's everything that I want to, like, if nothing else, like this is what I want to have in the game. of like, is there like specific sequences? Are there specific like character moments? Is this like an overarching plot? What are the mechanics? XYZ. And like I kind of I try to keep like my games very like minimalist of like what do we actually need to like get this game like in a state where like I'm like, hey, this is good. Like Drywall, for instance, there's a bunch of different ideas we had at this. Drywall is a very loose process. Like this, I would say, is probably like my messiest planned game in that like we just start like we already started it of like we kind of just spontaneously came up with that idea after like another game kind of like crashed and burned a little bit, but we're like, okay, we have this like game. The entire game concept is you're talking with people who make you so mad they want to eat drywall. And I was like, once we have that in there, then everything is just content that we're scaling with it. Like, there's some specific jokes I wanted to throw in, I put in like a minimal, like kind of plot in, but a lot of it kind of was like, I just need to figure out like, what is the critical mass for like completing a level of like, this feels solid enough for like, I would be happy if the player got through this and they felt like they got enough what they wanted out of it. You can kind of see like I think seasoned game developers would look through my game and they would notice that the office level is like the most like complex in terms of like that has like multiple storylines going on, as multiple quests, like multi-stage quests, and that's kind of like the only level in the game that's like that. And a lot of it is because that was the first level that we put together, and then everything else kind of was like we put a lot more effort into that, mostly just because it was the first one, and then we moved on to the next one. It's like, oh, we're kind of losing resources for like how much we can put in. It made some like pretty good moments. One of my favorite jokes I've posted around is that the level where you're working at the hardware store, you have to clean the bathrooms is a task that's given to you. And I didn't want to actually build out that task. So I put in this meta joke where like we put this like message up for 10 seconds that says Peripheral Playbox has decided to censor this task because this was too gross for us to build. And people really like, and also the thing, and then we had like an email contact for like, you can come and complain to us about that later. And I've gotten emails from people complaining or goofing around and whatever, but it's it's kind of just innovating in a lot of the moments. For like Hello Cool Worlds, we were like a lot more structured with that. I was like a much larger team, but it was very similar in a lot of ways where it's like I know there's like a couple sequences I know more or less like where I want the plot to go, so then we kind of just like fit the game around that. And that one was like a lot more structured, but I don't know. It's kind of tricky. Like I think for me the big thing is just like I kind of know everything I want to have in the game as soon as like once I have like the first draft of the GDD done or the first draft of the plot, I'm like, okay, I know how I want this game to go, and then I just build towards that as quickly as possible, and then everything else past that is like okay, it's just polish, we're just improving some things, and like at the very least like I try to make my schedules where it's like we always hit that point. I just hit the point where it's like I'm okay if we had to release this next week for an emergency or something, I would be happy with what's in there. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, that's so insightful. I looking back because I've played through, I see what you mean about the office place, but I mean it just feels so vibrant that I didn't even clock the difference in how much time was spent. So that was a good job. And also, yes, please check out the the message about the bathrooms. Before I move on to questions about publishers, we have a bunch of people in chat today. Hello, everyone. Wow. I see some familiar faces. I see some new names. Hello, everyone. So super excited to have you all here. I do want to take some time to address some of these questions. So the first one that I see here is, did you have a type of player in mind, or were there projects that you had in mind as the game I would like to play? So both of you feel free, whoever wants to hop in first, to answer that.
Yeah, I would say like for drywall, a lot of it, like I'll probably get into it more later. But like drywall was kind of more a project for us of like we just wanted to make something that was like goofing around. So I was that one was not so much for the player, but it was a lot of like we're going to get the same kind of people have like the same kind of humor and sensibilities as us. So I was based that's the game I've done the most where it's like this is a game that is for me. Like if I would pick this up, I would like this is the kind of humor I would want to see. Hello Crew World was more interesting in that like we had some limitations in like a lot of the concept, but ultimately what I actually went with that one of wanting to target people who spent hours playing like source engine mods like for Half-Life and Portal and stuff like there's people who immediately picked that up even in like the announcement trailers like, oh, this reminds me of like old Gmod maps, and I'm like, yes, that's exactly the kind of aesthetic I was like going for. And also the gameplay is a lot of that too, where we were just like limited in how like that was a VR game, so there's just a lot of technical limitations for how deep you can get with mechanics. And like so I was like, okay, we're going to make something that feels from that era a little bit. So it's a kind of game, both of those games I will say are like we're cutting out so many losses of like these are not I would say Hello Crew World is so much less easily accessible for like a general audience, but that was one where I was like, if you really like these kinds of puzzles, this kind of story, like this is you're eating good, like this is the perfect game for you. Um, but yeah, Alonso.
Awesome. Yeah, for us, it's kind of like there's two extremes. Because, like for example, Tika, our first game. What's interesting about that, and also kind of like bleeding into the publisher question, I guess. But like for Tika really started as a personal project for me and my team because that game is a game we started making at the end of 2019, which was kind of like a tumultuous year in our country because there's a lot of like political unrest. And then at the start of 2020, it was the start of the pandemic. So we're like all kind of like stressed, locked at home, and like let's make cute games to like relax. So in a sense, like for us, it was like a healing process of like let's try to make some cute game to distract ourselves from the world. And kind of like what was interesting about that process was that at some point I met a publisher, Matt White from Whitehorn Games, who saw this game that we were just doing as like a hobby project, and he said like, "Hey, yeah, this game is actually interesting. It's kind of games we'll fund. So we'll so are you interested like in doing this commercially?" And that's how we kind of like ended up scaling up this project and turning it into like a bigger game. But it really started as something that we wanted to make for ourselves, and really because we wanted something comforting. And at the same time, I think that was like early 2020. It's like when wholesome games were starting to like become more popular, a bit more mainstream, and kind of like the wholesome direct popped up, that showcase of wholesome games. So it's kind of like it started to become like something that's like really popular, and there's a lot of wholesome cozy games now. But at the time that we started doing it, it was really a game that we are doing because we is what we wanted to do. For Battle Galaxy, it was a bit different because we were much more explicit. Because we originally think about like a narrative of adventure kind of game where you just kind of walk around, talk to people, solve quests, and do stuff like that. But then for our game after Tick we wanted to do a similar kind of narrative adventure, but it didn't really work out. We pitched to publishers, and kind of like people weren't really biting. So we decided to like go back to the drawing board and try to do a bit more of like a market research guided approach to design our concept. We wanted to stick to making something cozy and wholesome because we enjoyed making Teacup. We realized that a lot of people were playing that kind of game, but we wanted to look to what other kind of game genre we could make that would be interesting to people. And that's how Bololong Galaxy turned out to be like a tile placing kind of city builder light kind of game. We really liked Dorf Romantic, which was like a very really popular game. It was like early access at that moment, and but it was still like doing super well, and people were really enjoying it. And like from the games that we're trying to like as we were doing our research, it was a game that we really liked. It felt like accessible for us to design a game like that. So we really wanted to make a game that kind of like felt right for that kind of audience, who people who like the game. But we also try to stay true to our internal interest, which is like we want games we make narrative adventures. We want games with a story. So Dorf Romantic was like a pure mechanical gameplay game. So we want to do something like that. Wanted to make a game for that audience, but give our own narrative twist to it, since that's what what we liked as players.
Yeah, no, that's thinking about the player is one of the things that I always really encourage like our students or interns or mentees who come through, because yes, like we should be building games that we want to make, but sometimes you got to consider like whether or not things are within the expectations of the genre, or if things are too difficult or not too difficult. That's one of the challenges we actually have on Threadbare, is we have a wide range of skill sets and abilities to navigate through different projects and in different systems. Like some folks are really excited by the Void Quest because you get to run around and escape the void, right? And you're trying to grapple across, kind of like these different platforms that are surrounded by the void, and some people find that really stressful. So
Yeah.
but with like an open source kind of community build game, it's really difficult for us to like narrow it down. So it's really helpful to hear what y'all are thinking of when you're making games, because really ours is very much influenced by who is building it, which is so different than when you're like starting from a concept and then building towards that. Like we will have people come in and go, oh, I really want to have like this like magic shell like feature or whatever. Like we had the winning team from the Lord Jam like have that, right? So it's a very different experience, and it's helpful to hear, like just for me too, like how y'all are approaching it. Okay, more questions. We have so many questions in chat.
Sure, yeah, let's do this. Let's do this.
Forget
Yeah.
my questions. Okay, so this next one's from Finn. Hello. What are key points in starting to promote the game once it's ready?
Ooh.
It's a good one.
I probably have to. Oh, sorry. Do you want to go ahead or?
Sure, yeah. I just gonna say, kind of like, you should be promoting the game before it's ready. It's kind of like one of those things that takes a long time. Building a community and audience is a slow process and very gradual. So it's something you should be seeking during development, not just when it's ready. Kind of like once you've already defined the concept and have like a nice can show what the game is going to look like, or even before that, if you have some concept art, it's already a good stage to start showing your game to people. And I think there's like so many options now, like short form video stuff like Blue Sky X, or maybe YouTube devlogs. So there's a lot of different options, but I think like it's a mix of having to find where your audience is at. Like, yeah, different people use different platforms, so like trying to test around and see what the people who play your game actually use. Like maybe they're all on TikTok, maybe they're all on Discord, or maybe they like watching very long YouTube devlogs. So that's one side to it, but there's also the side like it is a lot of work. It is very tiring to advertise your game, so you should also be finding what works for you. And kind of like, I think I've seen teams who like try to spread themselves really thin, and like they're posting on TikTok, they have a Discord, they have like Steam community posts, they do text posts, they do video posts, and they try to do a bit of everything, but they end up suffering because of it. So really trying to find which one you vibe with personally as a person, because it's, as I mentioned, it's something you have to do for a long time and consistently. So finding something that you are actually able to keep up with is a good option. Might not be like the most optimal one, but if it's something that you can keep up, I think that's ultimately a stronger option than something that you'll do at the big for a couple of months and then like fall off because it was too much work for you.
Yeah, like one of the just going back on like the spreading yourself too thin thing, like at Peripheral Playbox, like one of the tactics we had with Drywall was like, so we actually started out trying to like pursue, like, I guess we'll eventually get to publishers, I guess, but like we originally were like, oh, we're going to try and like get a game together, concept together that we pitch around to publishers. And one of the like that kind of crashed and burned a little bit, just because like we weren't ready to build a game at that scale yet. And then just like even going through the like initial, like even just showing the pitch to friends, I was like, oh, we are like months away from like being able to show that. And I was like, I kind of want to just know who we are as a, as a team. Like, who am I as like a, individualistic like dev, even. So Drywall was like, we're just making a game to just like be in our portfolio. And then we kind of learn all those lessons, like you said, of like, you know, like we did a little bit of like pre-release stuff. Like we had, actually, I'll shout out Char, who I believe is in chat, who's my co-founder. But like I partnered with her because she is in marketing, and she also runs the Women-Led Games Showcase. And that was like a perfect like yin to my yang of like, I'm very creative. I have a lot of creative and technical expertise. She has a lot of like biz dev and marketing expertise. But we're both at like a very similar level of like confidence and knowledge that we're like, okay, we're like both in this learning together. So like Drywall was like, we're just making a game in our portfolio, and we're just going to learn like, what do we like doing? How do we actually like where do we succeed in finding our audience? And like, you know, Drywall is also like a little bit calibrated to like, it's a very punchy it's a very, very catchy title. It's very easy to pitch. And like some of that was a little bit of an intentional, but that's also like kind of the games I love making. So like, but a lot of it was just like, we're using this as a learning experience, to like just be like, hey, do we like posting to TikTok? Do we like having a Discord? You know, and even just like, you know, also starting to just build up our audience, where like, you know, we're still in pre-production on our next game right now, but now we have this thing of like, hey, we have like people like Drywall, you know we can like, hey, we made this game, you can check it out, you can kind of see where our sensibilities are. If you're like, you know, it gives us like history already, that now we have like our next game that we're trying to like, you know, build up and be a little more like professional and more together with. And we're like, hey, we have this history we can like draw back from, like not for ourselves, but also just like, you know, to show other people. So it is really tricky. I would say also directly related to the question, like we had our announcement trailer, but one of the things I found difficult with Drywall is like the only thing I could really post are jokes, because like we didn't really, it's a very simple game mechanic, so like I didn't have anything like flashy to show besides like, you know, you're talking with someone and they say something crazy. So that was a game. Like our next game will probably have like a little bit more stuff we can show once we're ready, as we lead up to it. But I definitely like would recommend, like that's something to, here's actually a huge thing, is record everything from day one. Like I have a GIF that I made of like the first prototype I made of like smashing Drywall, where it looks bad. Like it's just literally, I made a wall in Blender that I like shattered, and then I added this like really simple mechanic. But like just having that is like, that's something I've like used in like slides and talks and whatever. But like just having that kind of thing on hand like all the time is really good, because then you can like go back and it's like, here's like, you know, before and after of like, here's where we started, we're just in this gray void clicking on a thing, and versus like, here's all the finalized art and whatever. But yeah.
No.
People love before and after, so yeah. Great device.
I'm staring at the camera because I'm realizing that maybe the two we need to take more. I actually want to point out Will and Manuel have been excellent at taking videos and making GIFs of all the content we've been doing. So thank you to them, and also thank you to our marketing and community teams. We're so fortunate that we have them. I just wanted to give them a quick shout out. Luis is behind the scenes as usual, running the productions. Thank you so much. And then I don't know if our marketing team's in the chat, but Rodrigo, Valentina, Yasmin, like thank you so much. Because that's one less thing that we have to think about kind of in our day-to-day, just having that support. But lots of really great ideas, and it makes me want to sit down and brainstorm some marketing stuff with y'all. So yeah,
sure, of course, whenever you want.
Yeah.
Sure, let's have like a impromptu live stream on brainstorming.
Sure.
Awesome. Okay, we have so many questions. Okay. I do want to skip down here for a little moment, yes, and say hello, Stephen. First off, hi. And Stephen says, I can see that unfold easier as a solo or small team dev, and I wonder how that informs the flow of a career for devs in larger studios or AAA giants. I think this was in reference to something you were saying, Jax. But yeah, no, Stephen, feel free to elaborate in chat if you would like.
Yeah.
I just wanted to call that out because that was in relation to the conversation.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Okay. I'm gonna give him a moment, but then yes, games are an expression of ourselves as players. This has to be true of game development too. Maybe a future live stream topic. Yeah, for sure.
That's a great topic. Yeah.
It is. Bring us back. Okay, going back up, we've got somebody questions. I think it was, Joanna. Okay, how is it different to decide that the game is finished for a game that is for you and a game that, okay. How is it different to decide that the game is finished for a game that is for you and a game that has a target player? And how does it change what comes next in your expectations?
This is hard. Yeah. Do you want to take this first, Jax?
Yeah, like I guess I'll reference more Hello Crew World, which like that like it depends so much on just looking at the question in chat again, because yeah, that's a really tough one. It is a kind of thing where it's like, you know, you're always making a game for you, and then you're always also making a game for like a target player. And like you know, like I was saying with Drywall, like Drywall's kind of like I was the target player for a little bit, but when you have to like think outside yourself, it can get really tricky because like one of the things I always I'm sure everyone's like referenced this a bunch in game development, but like no plan survives first contact with the enemy is like a quote that I think about all the time of like you can plan for so much stuff and then like you launch the game and then people are like confused or love or like just the reactions you get are like completely opposite like of what you expected. So I would say like, you know, if you're trying to target, if you have like a certain audience in mind, like my advice would kind of be just like bake into your timeline a lot of play testing with that audience. Like if you're like, hey, we want to target like gamers who love like match 3, for instance, or something, like you want to try and like find those people and, you know, bring a bunch of them in and just see like just get like you're not going to get like, you know, the accurate you're probably not gonna get like a super accurate like representation of like what the actual reaction is going to be when you launch the game, but you at least like get some idea that there's probably going to be things in there that like will surprise you. I don't know, it's really tricky because like, you know, when you're targeting an audience, like it does depend on a lot of the reasons why you're targeting an audience. Like Hello Crew World, like we were like that's a VR game, so it's a VR game. It's a single player VR game. It's a single player puzzle horror VR game. So that was like, we have a niche of a niche of a niche of a niche like audience. So that was a thing where it's like, that was a game where like my joke in it is like, there's going to be like 12 people that this game is for kind of thing. But like we had the, you know, just the situation in that is like that allowed us to still make the game. But there's a lot in there that we were thinking about of like, oh, how do we make this like still accessible to people? There's a lot of like for VR, for instance, like we spent a lot of time on accessibility, just in like the options that you give to the player of like, we have like both like locomotion, I won't get into the terminology for VR, but like, you know, there's multiple different ways you can like even just move around in VR that we integrated like both of them into that game. And you know, there's a bunch of different options, like you can mess with the height and whatever, but those are like things that were like, we need to make this a priority because like if we don't have this in the game, we lose like a chunk of the audience right away. Like even if we go and patch it in later, people are like you just miss your chance of like, oh, I'm here now, sort of thing. I don't know, like I think it's very, I don't know, I can let you talk, Alonso, but like I think my ultimate answer is you kind of just have to like put it in front of people and see how they feel, and also just think about how you feel, because it's like it's hard to I think we both were kind of like, it's very hard to just like end a game and know when it's finished. So it's even harder when it's an audience that like kind of just, you don't know how, like it kind of lives in your head a bit. But I can let you go if you got a better answer.
I don't know if I have a better answer, and I think you hit on something really important there, which kind of like with the example of locomotion. And there's like something in the question that I want to zero on in, which is in a very important word, and I think about often, which is expectations. And I think that's like a great lens in which to think of everything, because like I think there's a lot of different ways you can approach it. Like, what are your expectations as a team for this game, but also what are the expectations for a player for your game? And I think there's like definitely some work there to make sure there's an alignment of like what you expect to be able to do as a team will actually meet the player expectations for what this game is. And there's definitely also a lot of work there, like done in marketing, to make sure you're like communicating what exactly your game is and making sure that people know what they're going to get. And I think, at least for us, it has been pretty useful just to really think about, especially like as a small team, like we know our resources are limited, so that we won't be able to like compare with bigger games, like even other indie games from bigger indie studios. We can't really compare directly. So to make sure that we are actually kind of like focusing on what are like a clear, if players want to play the game from this genre, what are the expectations, like base expectations, what would surprise them, what wouldn't surprise them because they think it should be there. So like knowing we're hitting those expectations while also kind of communicating what the game is, and so that players can arrive to the game expecting one thing and what not something else. I think for me at least that helps a lot, making sure that we're actually hitting what we need to hit to call the game finished.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my gosh, y'all are so active in chat today. This is wild.
Yeah. Great questions. Great questions. I found it now, so keep on going. Yeah.
Keep going. Okay. I see. Yeah. Okay. Steven has a question. Okay. Oh, this is a good one. It's also a little bit. I love it. Okay. We're all gonna have really different opinions, and I can't wait. So, what if a game is never finished? Is that okay? Can a game be in development forever? We need to know. People need to know. I'm happy to give you all a chance to think.
I think I got an answer right away.
You have something, Sarah? Go ahead. Yeah.
It's, I don't know. Like, I will say I've been in games for like 10 years, and I would say like I've worked on so many projects that just like kind of just don't ever get finished, and like a lot of the time the answer is you just never hear about them. Like there's like games that are bigger than like anything I've ever worked on that like are just like probably never going to see the light of day, and that's like kind of just, there's a million different reasons why like something like that can happen. I like, a lot of my approach with stuff is like, kind of what I was saying at the beginning is like, I try to look for like I try to be minimalist, because I'm like, at least if it's minimal, I can probably finish it. And that's like that's pretty important, like to me, to like just be able to like have a thing finish and have it out there. Like I am like, one of the things with drywall is like, you can kind of see when you like look through the Steam, like it's a game that I was trying to push to see how much could I get away with like just making like a very kind of like unpolished but like very stylistic kind of game. Like all the 3D assets are just like store-bought like assets from Unity, but I have like a visual filter over everything, so it kind of looks a little more interesting. All the character art, which was done by some very talented friends of mine, like that was something is like, okay, we have to have the characters all have to be custom, because that's something I want to have people like people are going to be focused on that, and you don't want to get them distracted by why do they look like they came from some other game kind of thing. But it's, I don't know, like a lot of it was trying to see like not to worry about like polish as much or trying to be as flashy, and just trying to be like, because I was like, we made that game in like 9 months, and like we were self-funding it, so just a lot of that was like, that's kind of what we already were like working with. But I was seeing like, how can we actually make this game like actually work if we're not getting that much farther than like where our gray box prototypes are looking. Our next game is going to be like a little more fancy, I think, but it's something where it's like I'm very comfortable with like just letting a game like kind of just be out there without not entirely in the vision that like I thought of it. And I mean, you already kind of, as it's a weird thing, because it's like, you know, the game that you have when you start development is almost never the game that you end with, like in so many ways. Like even if it's like Hello Crew World, like we spent 2 years on that, and I look back at the game design doc I made in like the first month, and I was like, oh, we only used like 25% of what's in this doc. And you know, we're still happy with the game, and the game still does like everything I wanted it to do. But there's like, oh wow, there's a whole boss fight in here that like would have taken a year for us to build, and that just never even, the hints of that never even ended up in the game. And I guess that answered the other part of the question: can a game be forever in development? Like, I don't know. I mean, if you got that money, I guess for it is the real answer. But I don't know. I mean, like there's a lot of games. Like I was actually talking with a friend about No Man's Sky last night, where that's like a very interesting example of, when did that game come out? That was like 2016, maybe. I want to say.
I think so,
Maybe
yeah.
I was in East Boston when it came out, so
Yeah.
it might be like 2015, 2016. Yeah.
I know I was in college still,
Yeah.
like, and this, but it's like they're still updating that game, and they're still like completely. It feels like every time it comes out, it like completely transforms the game, but everyone's still like excited for it. So it's like, you know, I think there's models for it out there. Definitely, it's just like, you know, you have to like build a game that kind of like can support that, and also like, you know, figure out the way that you can sustain that, because like, you know, No Man's Sky, like I don't know what their I don't know, like budget or sustainability or what. I mean, like it's just, you know, I think there's still like an upcoming patch or something that was like just announced or whatever. But that's like the thing where it's like, you know, they're 10 years out, I guess. They must be. I know they've been talking about that game for more than 10 years, but like, but that's just the thing where it's like, you know, it's just being consistent, and just having like, I think just, you know, the consistency with your vision, and then also just figuring out like, you know, how do you still make it work like 10 years in or whatever. But I mean, there's not that many games that like are able to do that. I just caveating, like No Man's Sky is like such a huge outlier for like anything, I think. So, but it's still, you know, at least it's so cool that there's still like at least a couple guys making it out there like that. So
Cool stuff. Yeah, I'm not sure if I have that much that like Jack's answer like super complete. I'm not sure if you have any perspectives, how like from Threadbare, since they mentioned it in the chat, like how you guys thinking about that.
I mean, it's interesting because I come from a background of games that have never really ended. Like I've worked on The Sims, which Sims 4, I believe, launched in 2014. So we're like 12 years out. And then PUBG, which is also still going. But the models that they've existed on are a little bit different than what we're doing in Threadbare, because for both Sims and PUBG, you have like what's called a base game, which is like not an MVP, but it's like, here's the core features, like here's like the core gameplay experience. By itself, it is a full thing. Like technically, whether you felt like the Sims 4 base game release was complete or not, it technically could stand on its own. But then EA releases DLC. Right, and so you have like the different clothing kits, the different gameplay kits, the different like build buy stuff, which is like customizing your kitchen. And then PUBG has this like new maps, new weapons, sometimes new mechanics, but it's really like building on the stuff that they currently have versus like adding a lot more content. So Threadbare is kind of in this weird in-between situation, which is a fun space to be, by the way. Like as a producer, it's like completely new problems, or like similar problems, but in a different lens, because we're trying to build Threadbare in a way that's almost like reverse Sims, in a way where, you know, normally we would have like, here's like the space game, and then you would do the content. But because we are building with a community, and the community has wants and needs and desires, and then we as developers have wants and needs and desires, right? We are focusing on like, okay, so here's what the core loop is, right? And Jax has had a hand in that recently. But like, how do we almost do like these little vertical slices of content as well? So we're building things out like if a Sims gameplay pack was actually part of the initial release, where you're slicing things out individually. So we had the Void release. We're going to have like interiors and libraries next, which is something I'm sure we're going to have a live stream about at some point. So we're focusing on it that way. And when you have an open source community built game, it never really ends. Like if you look at all these other open source games, they're not done either. They're just going to continue in perpetuity, right? Because people keep coming and adding stuff, and it's just such like a different experience. And I'm curious to see what Threadbare is going to look like 10 years from now, right? So I mean, it's probably going to be like this like big sprawling, like different worlds, different stuff. It's going to look so different, and that's what's so exciting about it. But that's kind of like, I guess, how I'm feeling about it. And, I can't wait to hear what the rest of the team is going to say. I'm going to come back to them and be like, what do you think? So it's a great question for sure. Okay. Back to chat. Okay, here we go. Finn, another great question. What's the most difficult aspect of development? Is there an area that challenges you the most? Alonso, do you want to start?
How about the most challenging part is finishing the game? No.
That is hard. Yeah, it's really difficult.
Yeah, and I think we've been talking about it a lot. So yeah, but I don't think like I think just kind of like return to the theme of the episode. I do think there's I've walked around it, but yeah, like even if you're like super concrete about we're reaching the end of the process and like this is the end of our timeline and we need to release it, or like the game is good enough. I still think it is emotionally complex to like, especially if it's a project you've been working like for years, to like actually start wrapping up and saying goodbye, and it's kind of like hard to really. I think, at least for me, I'm going to talk about maybe from a more emotional perspective, but kind of like just being able to wrap up this thing that's been like part of your life and like occupy most of your brain for so much years, and have to start to say goodbye for that. For me, it's been challenging. I think it really depends on the person. There's some people who thrive more on external validation and kind of like get the game releases and then they get reviews and they're like happy because people are playing it. But for me, the part I enjoy the most is like the development part. So for me, there's like a bit of emptiness or sadness like when actually finishing a game, and so it's kind of like it's happy because I'm releasing it and getting other people to play it, but also it's kind of sad because like I'm not going to be working on it anymore, and I really enjoyed working on the projects. Normally, the projects I've worked on, like thankfully, I've enjoyed working on them. And even though there's like this whole period where you're like closing and like trying to release a product for people to play, you also have to be ready for what happens afterwards. And kind of like, for me, it's kind of like this mix of kind of like, oh wow, it's over, I'm sad, but also like people are playing the game, they're giving reviews, they're giving us feedback, they are pointing out bugs, so you still have to be like ready to respond to those bugs and kind of like be communicating with players. So for me, there's like a lot of emotions related to releasing a game, but you still have to be there like in your best state, like we were talking about this week, is that last week, that it's not just a sprint, it's a marathon. So you have to be like ready. You can't really treat it as the finish line because there's more work to be done after the game releases. So you have to balance managing all those emotions, all that closing process, but also be ready to respond to player feedback, which requires like community management. It requires like being quick on your feet when programming. It requires you be managing all the platforms and try to release the game on Steam and also cross platforms as quick as possible. So it's a lot, and I do think it's a challenging process of development.
Yeah, like I kind of have, I feel like an opposite perspective of like, I find it very, very hard to start the game, or like, or maybe not start, but just like, it's very hard for me. I mean, this is also like something we're struggling with right now, is like, just what is the game going to be? Because like I definitely feel a lot of the like the melancholy of like releasing the thing, and then like it feels like a tide coming in, kind of a little bit of like, you release the thing and then you have this wave of like just everything that comes afterwards of like, like you said, like the bug fixing and whatnot. But the thing I kind of struggle with is like, just, okay, I'm going to be working on this thing for the next 2 years. Like, is this something I actually feel like I could commit to for like, a long period of time? Because like, both Hello Crew World and Drywall were things that like once development really started on those, it like completely dominated my life. And it's hard for me to say like, is it like, I like having options a little, I don't know, like it's hard to me to like, I wouldn't say like commit, but I think just like being, like there's going to be days where I'm like, hey, I don't really want to work on this game or whatever, or like I want to try doing something else. And I think like part of that is the thing I'm trying to learn is like how to scale everything. So it's like when I start feeling that, like Drywall was kind of perfect, where it's like that was like 9 months, and like by the time I was kind of getting, not like getting sick of Drywall, but like towards the end of it, I was like, okay, I'm ready to move on to the next thing a little bit, even though like I still, there's still a lot with Drywall that I'm like working with, and stuff that's going to make it into the next game a little bit. Spoilers, I guess, but it's just, yeah, just thinking about the like, I don't know. Yeah, just thinking about like, is this going to be the next 2 years of my life, and am I okay with that kind of thing? Is like such a hard thing to reckon with. But you at the end of the day, it's like you still just gotta like. The way I get around that is I work with people who get like impatient with me when I'm in that phase, or I'm like, Jax, just pick something. We're just doing this, or like we just need to decide on something. And I'm like, okay, because if it was just me, I think I would just make like. I don't know. I'd probably just be making like, the same game for like forever and just making a bunch of different decisions. So that's why I surround myself with people who want me to make decisions. So
Yeah, I guess you experience this too as a producer, Sarah. But yeah, I'm also the person on my team. Like, decide something, just pick whatever. It's good.
yeah.
But I love the fact that we both pick different extremes of the game development process as our answers. It depends on the person.
Well,
yeah.
I'm going to add a third perspective, which is the messy middle is always really rough for me. So we're like beginning, middle, end.
Yeah.
It's difficult because, and I think this goes for like any creative project really, whether it's like games or writing or film or whatever. Like, at least for me, like the beginning, I'm like, okay, I've got this plan, I've got this idea, like it's gonna be great. And the end, I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm finished. Like I feel this sense of bittersweet, like, oh, it's no longer mine. It's whoever's playing, reading, watching, whatever. The middle is like, am I crazy for wanting to do this? Have I lost my, like, is this really worth it? It's so tough to be in the middle of it all, where you've made enough progress where you're like, I don't want to give this up, but then you're close enough to the end, you can see the end of the tunnel. It's just really hard. And I think that's why it's so important to have creative communities to help us. Like that's something that y'all have touched on, is you have people that you've spoken with, whether it's like publishers or like peers or people working on the project with you. It's really important to uplift each other. And I think, sorry, bringing it back to Threadbare, I think it's really important for us to continue to communicate with each other, because here's the thing is we have people everywhere building Threadbare, like all the time. And when you are sitting in your room by yourself and you're like, I guess I'm going to implement this feature, I don't know about the devs. Like it's so important to come into like Discord and chat and see, because like we're here, like we'll hop on a voice call. Like it's so important to surround yourself with people. And when you're in the middle of it or the thick of it and you've got no one, that's what's hard. And I imagine a lot of solo devs kind of feel that way too. And I'm very thankful that we all, we have the gaming community. We can call each other. We've got, Discord. Discord is the way of life, right? So, okay, we have, I just want to point out, because we are a little over halfway through. We have so many good questions in chat. And I want to point to one in particular and bring us back to kind of like the original topic at hand, which is about finish, like what happens after. So I'm sorry we can't get to every single one, which is a great problem to have. But I do want to point out Ninth's question, because this was something we were going to talk about, which is what's the decision process like to decide if you want a game publisher or not? That's such a big one, because I think you all have made different decisions. So I'm curious, what made you say yes or no? And do you still agree with that decision?
Sure. Yeah, I'll take that quickly because we've had two different publishers, and it's been a different experience with both. So I touched upon this earlier, but for our first game, it wasn't really like made as a commercial project as first. It just kind of like ended up happening because we were like, yeah, let's make this for fun. I ended up like showing it casually to this publisher during a networking call, and he was like, hey, yeah, maybe I could fund this. So we're like, okay, yeah, maybe we should do this. Um, but for our second game, it was like a much more intentional process where we're like, okay, looking for publisher, pitching, going to meetings, and had a much clearer ask for what we needed. And really, I think what it comes down to is that we are in an age where it's super easy to publish games online, at least compared to where it was like 10 or even 20 years ago. But there's a lot of work that goes into releasing a game, whether it be the marketing, porting to consoles if you want to release on consoles, localization if you want to reach a wider audience and have your game in more than one language. And kind of like a publisher is like best equipped to handle this kind of activities, since they can really batch it, and like if they have one person who can translate the game to Spanish, then they can have the same person translate multiple games, or have somebody who's really good at porting games to Nintendo Switch and help out multiple games port to Nintendo Switch. So really, it kind of becomes a question of like, what is your priority? Like, especially if you're trying to pursue games and try to maximize its commercial impact, there's really an advantage to going with a publisher who can help focus on the business side. Like, we're really happy for TikTok, for example. Our publisher has continued. This game came out in 2021, and they continue to help us market it. Like, for example, we were like part of a big mobile store deal, and like the game was available for free a couple of months ago on the big mobile store. And that's something that opportunity we probably wouldn't have found by ourselves, but our publisher, who's always like going to meetings and doing this kind of outgoing work, managed to find a deal for us, which was great. And I'm kind of also skipping over the super important point of funding, like publisher software funding. So like if you need that commercial side to like really start your studio, that's super important too. But I do think like I just go back to like, if you just want to get the game in front of people, you want to get people to try the game, you want people to just play it and tell you what to think, and like learn a bit more about who your studio and who your community is. I think you can definitely do that nowadays without a publisher.
Yeah, like I would follow that up. Like in my position, like Akipara was like an indie publisher that I worked at for like 4 years. Like I was on the dev side, but there's a lot of like just things through osmosis, just watching people and seeing the process like on the other side, that I came out of it knowing a lot of like what would I want to have out of a publisher, like what could I even like just do on my own a little bit. And then even partnering, founding the studio with Char, like who has like marketing and experiences that like supplement mine. Like we so like at Playbox, we originally were going to take all this knowledge, and we're like, oh well, we already know enough where we can just like go around and make a pitch like we have a cool pitch or whatever, and like we like everyone will be lining up because we've already worked with like we're kind of already half experienced or whatever was our mindset. And then we kind of had like a like the game pitch was like fine, but it just was like a lot of like, oh, we still have like a lot of stuff to learn, like I said before, it's like about ourselves even. So Drywall was like from many angles, but like the big thing was just like we just needed to prove to ourselves a little bit that we could even do this. And a big thing was also like I think it was like early 2025 we were looking at this, which like that was a very, very rough time to be looking around, especially if you're like a very like novice team or just like you unproven team, I guess. Like it was the kind of thing where I was looking at it, it's like I feel like we could be spending 6 months like pitching to publishers, talking with publishers, and trying to find someone that would like be a good fit for us. And like we may not even end up with like anyone at the end of it, or we could spend 6 months like just working on a game and see how far we get on our own. And like that's more of what I'm able to do. So I was like, okay, let's try. We'll bite the bullet. We'll just do everything like we'll just self fund ourselves, and we'll just like roll with the consequences of that. But then just see like, how far can we get by ourselves was a lot of it. Like, our next game we're going to try, I think the big need that we have for us right now is just funding. And depending on like the scale of the game, like we were only planning Drywall to be on Steam. So it's like Steam is like the barrier of entry is like 100 USD. So it's like it's very easy to like just upload and publish on your own. And like we don't need, there's still like marketing, there's still like localization that could be, like we didn't do localization. That's something that we still might, we may retroactively publish someone if we want to try to get it on consoles. We want to get localization. And it is the kind of thing of like, you kind of just like look at it as like, what can a publisher like actually offer you? And like, is what they would be like taking from you, or just like, the revenue that will be like sent to them, is that enough for you to like, want to have these things for your game, I guess. Like for Drywall, we're like, a lot of Drywall was like after the fact, we'll see like how well this does, and then we'll decide if we like want to, have someone like retroactively come in and add all this stuff that we want. We might do that. Like the second game, we are probably going to try and pursue a publisher. We are looking into like a few different options, but it is really a thing of like just kind of thinking about like what the scope of your game is, and like how much I think a lot of it is like try pitching the game to someone, just do like say like, hey, can I like, find someone who like knows enough about game development and pitching. Like I have a lot of friends in publishing, so there's a few people it's like, hey, or other developers, it's like, hey, can I pitch this game to you, as interview practice kind of thing almost, and just see how you feel about that. Because like, that can also be a thing where you're like, oh, you immediately know, like, is this a game that you actually want to like advertise or pitch in that way, kind of thing. I would say I'm really curious, like, had we tried to pitch Drywall around, if it would have like ended up the same game that it did, because I think like we did a lot of things that like I don't think publishers would have initially liked. There's probably people who would have gone for it, but I think like there's a lot of different creative decisions that would have been made if we like had funding right away. But
yeah. And you kind of touched on this, but I want to, ask this final question, y'all. First off, thank you for joining us. So many great questions. This chat was so active. It was hard keeping up with all of you. Love the energy. Thank you so much. And so for our last question, okay, so this is from Steven, and then this is totally not helpful for us at all, but how do you choose a publisher that's right for you in your game, right? Because like we've even talked about it about Threadbare, and we're like, should we ask someone? Should we not? How do we figure out? So I guess Steven's asking you, I'm also asking both of you, like, how do you figure that out? We're trying to explore the possibilities, but we're just not sure. So both of you have experience. Please impart it. I'm going to drink it up like a fire hose.
Sure.
Do you want to go or me? Okay.
You go, yeah.
All right. It's kind of what I was saying already, but it is a lot of just thinking about like, look at what they're offering. Like look at, generally like what a publisher offers, and then just thinking about like how much of this do you want for your game. I would say at like a lot of it is thinking about like the scale of like what are you able to do as a developer on your own. And like if you're like, hey, I can do localization on my own, or like I can afford to like, have people translate, the game for me or something. That's something I don't need a publisher for. If you're looking at publishers that like they want to do that, or that's mostly what they're offering, kind of thing. But there's like publishers that there's so many different kinds of types of publishers out there. Like there's there's ones that focus on like, console porting, QA, marketing, and all this kind of stuff. So like a lot of it is, what I usually tell people is like, you kind of like, if you're, especially if you're a solo dev, like you will know if you need a publisher, if you're feeling like overwhelmed with like the amount of stuff that you want to do. And that's like a good time to kind of just start thinking about like, not necessarily like scaling down your game, but just thinking about like, how do I bring in help, and how much like, I think a big thing is to think about is also, it's like, how much like the revenue split's gonna be, because like publishers offer like different I don't know how much like consistency there is, but like usually I think it's like 30% of like your revenue also goes to a publisher. But so sometimes that doesn't matter as much to people, but like, sometimes it's like, hey, I'm offering, they're taking 30% from me, and the only thing they did is like post about it on like, Twitter like 3 times, and it's like, okay. So I mean, it's a kind of thing of like, you look at a publisher, see if you could like find a developer that's worked with them before, ask them how they are. Just ask around, I think, is a really huge one. But I think, yeah, like think about like, what do you feel like you need help with, and like what are you willing to do on your own, because basically like you have to look at the publisher, it's like it's offloading like a lot of stuff. And especially like the newer you are, like there's also the advantages of like they have like longer reach than you, they have like more like solid connections with like platforms. So it's like, hey, I want to get on like Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo, like going to a publisher, like those are things like, this is the thing where it's like, I'm looking at, it's like I've literally like made like Nintendo port games, so it's like I have the expertise to like port that myself. But getting Nintendo to like talk to me is like, something that's still a relationship you have to build up. So then you have to decide, is that something I want to spend my time doing, or do I want to just have a publisher like, just send an email like, hey, we've got a new game for you, kind of thing. So it's a kind of thing of like, once you feel you're ready to start talking to people, like, I mean, I would just start talking to people, like even for drywall, we still talk to a couple things, even if we didn't feel we were going to like go with anyone. It's still just like good to think about like what your options are. I don't know, it's very hard. It's like, it's kind of, it is a little bit like dating, of like, you just have to kind of just talk with a lot of people, and then just see like, where the vibe is, kind of. But yeah.
Awesome stuff. Yeah, and I'll highlight kind of like totally agree with what you said, and I guess I'll highlight like, yeah, what do you need to offload is kind of like a great question to have, kind of, especially like if you can do it in house. Sometimes it might be better. Kind of like, I do think I've heard like horror stories about like a lot of people signing up to with the publisher because they wanted help with porting, but then the publisher did like a quick or not very detailed job of doing the port, and then the game came out like on a not so great state on certain consoles. So kind of like, if there's an opportunity for you to do something yourself and you are like confident you can take that risk, it's always something like good to consider. And I think also, yeah, like I think all publishers know how to present themselves well on paper on their website during pitch meetings, but like the only true test is talking with other developers. And thankfully, we have most game developers are great about this. Like, they're not really shy about talking to you about their experience with the publisher, whether it was positive or negative. So I think like talking around with publishers is great, but also talking around with the developers of those that have worked with publishers before. You can always like check which games they've released as a publisher, and then reach out to those developers. And I think the last point I just want to add is really kind of like, yeah, you can always philosophize about what is the best publisher or what is the right publisher for your game, but the reality is also kind of like the publisher who's going to actually offer your deal, which is like a very small subset of all the publishers you can talk to. So kind of like sometimes like you might have a very clear idea of what you want, and sometimes you might end up only being able to get a deal from publisher that you might not meet all those points. And sometimes like you have to pick like, is the publisher maybe the right choice, even though, I mean, even if they're not the perfect choice, should I take it anyways? And I think that's a very case-by-case conversation. But I do think like, especially in our case, kind of like, yeah, we had a lot of dreams of appropriate, great publishers for our game. The publisher we ended up working with might not have been our first choice, but it did feel like it made sense for us at the moment, and we are happy that we work with them because, like, even though there was like some struggles in the process, we managed to release the game thanks to working with them.
Wow, thank you both. I was taking notes the entire time. This is really, really helpful. And we are actually over time. This is incredible. So I want to take a moment to thank both of you. A round of applause for joining us today. Thank you so much. I learned so much. I think the chat learned so much. I want to continue this conversation.
Sure.
So I will definitely be asking questions. And if folks have questions, you're welcome to ask like in the comments section too. Like we can definitely get those answers to you. And I also want to thank everyone today who joined us. Great questions, great energy. Oh my gosh, like this is what we're talking about. Like community is so important and y'all are part of that. And also, of course, please play Threadbare. This game cannot exist without you. Please help us make it. We have the link is flashing across. We've got links in chat for playing it. We've got links to GitHub. We have links to Discord. We are active. We are here. We're waiting for you. If there's something you're dying to see in Threadbare, like this is your chance to get it in. But thank you so much for joining us today. Next week, same time, we have a very special episode. I think it's going to be live from Games for Change with Steven and Heather and myself. So join us then. Until then, though, have a good rest of your day, y'all.